Welcome back on the show. It is time to bring in our next guest. That is going to be Taylor Eldridge. He is the Wichita State Athletics beat writer for the Wichita Eagle. You can check out his work at kansas.com. Hey, Taylor, appreciate you coming on the show. I mean, I feel like you're always churning out all these good stories and like heavy hitters. And like, so like for you, like how many stories do you actually just have in the works at this very moment?
Yeah, I feel like there's always, always work to be done. There's always, good stories around Wichita. When you cover just about all sports in Wichita, it seems like there's always something going on. So, yeah, probably four or five. It seems like always kind of like in the holster that you're working on, that you're trying to get to. And then maybe like two or three kind of big projects that, if I ever get the time to just sit down and really dig into subjects, I'd really like to do. But yeah, I mean, I try to pump out, at least two or three stories a day. And, when you're covering Wichita State, high school sports, all the semi-pro teams, pro teams in Wichita, there's no shortage of content. So there's always good stories to get to.
How much you enjoy those feature stories, or to that ability to just kind of elaborate on certain subjects, and also like how much work goes into some of those?
Yeah, that's a lot of research. That's what I always tell people. Those feature stories, you have to be a good writer to tell them, to make them compelling, but you also have to be a really good reporter. You got to get those details, and that's what makes those stories so good, in my opinion, is when you can come up with that little nugget, or just like that little detail that really sets the scene and really puts the reader in the kind of puts that in their head. So it's a lot of work. It takes multiple days on a lot of them, a lot of reporting, a lot of interviews, a lot of researching old articles. Just depends on the subject. But yeah, it's definitely a multi-day process and a lot of work. But when they come out really well, there's no better feeling than writing a good feature story that readers are going to enjoy. Those are my favorite stories to write.
I think so many, like, there's a lot of great sports writers, across the entire state, and a lot of them for their local newspapers, they have they have more responsibilities, but two main goals of like maybe previewing a story or a game coming up and then recapping that event. So what's coming up and how did it go? Like for you as a beat writer, though, I always like find it interesting that, you're also, occasionally like infusing some of that analysis or maybe a few takes. Like how do you balance that as a writer, like your journalistic responsibilities, but also kind of as a beat writer as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think now you try to avoid falling in that trap, especially like for like example, Wichita State men's basketball season. Very easy to fall into that rhythm: preview story, game story, reaction. Then 3 days later, they're playing again. You start the cycle all over again. So I do that. A lot of preview stories, a lot of reaction stories, a lot of analysis. But I try to mix it up throughout the season. Keep it fresh and find stories that I think that readers would find interesting, more than just like the simple, like, here's the preview, here's how many points per game this team is averaging, here's their star player, yada yada yada. You can figure that stuff out pretty easily. If you want, I want to tell the reader something they don't know, especially in those recap stories. We're all watching the same game. You can get the same box score that I'm looking at. I want to be able to tell the reader something they didn't know watching that same game, whether that's something that I figured out through my experience, kind of working with the team, being behind the scenes, just the research that I do. If that's something I can, a little nugget in the story, if I can put that in there, or if that's something I picked up, from being courtside at the game, I hear stuff, paint the picture that way. I want to be able to tell the reader something they didn't know when they watch the same game as I did. So, that's kind of my focus. You try to break it up during the basketball season and do a little, variety, so you don't fall into that trap. And I feel like that makes it a little bit more entertaining to read. And, the readers, just giving them content that they want to consume. I think that's the job. And, that's evolving, every single year.
You told me that you like watching film, like game film. Like, so like how much game film are you watching? And also like, what are you trying to take from it when you are watching it?
Yeah, I'm a total basketball nerd. You could probably see like the stuff behind me. Very big NBA fan. Grew up on '90s NBA. Just love the game, and to me, I would be doing this stuff even if I wasn't getting paid to. I just love the X's and O's. I watch a ton of stuff, a ton of NBA X's and O's, a lot of European stuff, and I just enjoy it. Like I'm just a fan of basketball. I love doing it, and to be able to apply that to my beat, I feel like it can kind of shed some light and give fans kind of an interesting perspective on some things. And I watch a lot of film during Wichita State basketball season to try to figure stuff out, especially like on the defensive side. I feel like that's always entertaining for fans. They look at the score, or they say like, wow, they held the star player to 12 points. Like, how did they do that though? And I like really digging in and kind of being able to come up with answers, or at least show fans something like, here's what they were doing, because it's so easy to fall into that trap of just watching the ball. That's just the natural reaction. You just follow wherever the ball is when you're watching a game live on TV. But a lot of the really good stuff, it's always happening away from the ball. And then, that's where you kind of see stuff really happen in basketball. So I watch a ton of film. It has led to some stories that I found really interesting. And I think kind of, provides further context and comes, came up with some cool story ideas because of that. But like I said, I love it. Doesn't feel like work to me. So I would just be doing it anyway.
Taylor Eldridge joining us here with the Wichita Eagle. You're from Wichita, right? Originally?
I am. Yep.
All right. So, well, like, tell me how the fit happened with the Wichita Eagle. Was it just natural? Okay, hey, I want to be a writer. I'm from Wichita. Like, did it all happen just that naturally?
Yeah, back in high school, I went to Goddard, and they always ask you to fill out those questionnaires, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, what's a career path that you might be interested in? Back when you're like a sophomore or something like that, and I just always thought, man, like if you could get paid to watch sports, specifically basketball, man, what a great job! Like, what's better than that? So, I just always had from an early age, just my mindset, I want to be a writer. And I just kept working at it, and luckily for me, like I never really had to get a full-time job anywhere else. I was able to write so much when I was coming up. As a correspondent, I would write for pretty much any publication in Wichita. I would string for the Wichita Eagle, do high school sports. I would write for Vipe magazine. I would write for the Times Sentinel, which is a weekly newspaper on the west side of Wichita. So I was writing a ton of stories every single week, getting a lot of good reps in, and just kind of had my heart set on it. It's like, I just want to be a sports writer. I always thought that was a really cool job, and to get paid to watch sports, that just felt like, the right thing for me back then. And like, 20 years later, really happy with that decision. Like I said, it does not feel like work to me. I feel so fortunate to be able to do something I love every single day. And like I said, there's always a new story to chase. A lot of the things are similar, but it's always something new. You never get old, you never get tired of it. So I love what I do, and been fortunate to be able to write for the Eagle now for 20 years.
Yeah, it's worked out well. I mean, covering Wichita State, I mean, I imagine like, just with their athletic departments, like that's enough, like in a full-time job as well, just as far as reporting on it. But like you make the time for high school sports, like how important is it for you to continue to cover, high school sports there, not only Wichita area, but also I feel like the Eagle has kind of a statewide appeal.
Yeah, it's funny, when I first started writing, the sports department at the Wichita Eagle, that was really the tail end of like the golden generation. We probably had, 15 different writers doing all sorts of stuff, and, really fortunate to be able to experience that. Even though I wasn't full time, I was able to go in on Friday nights and see the newspaper get made, back when the printing press was here in Wichita. You stick around, you write your story, you stick around till like 11 p.m. on a Friday night, and you get to see the actual newspaper the next day come out. Really special stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, it is kind of daunting because you're doing the job that, probably 5 or 6 different people did, 10 years ago. And it's a shame that, it's that it's that way, but that's the way it's going everywhere. And so I do feel like, there's a lot of responsibility. I came up doing high school sports. That's why I still do it now, because obviously the Wichita State beat is my main focus. But,
Sure.
I always loved high school sports. If I love basketball, I love what I do now, but man, I always have that soft spot for high school sports. I just love, writing stories, keeping stats, updating standings, just doing stuff like that for the high school sports. And there's so many good stories, when you're in a Wichita coverage area, we cover around 90 different schools, up to our coverage area. And if there's like a really good statewide story too, like I'll probably dig into that. So I just always have had a soft spot for high school sports. The Wichita Eagle was the gold standard, in my opinion, back when Joanna Chadwick, Dwayne Frazier,
Yeah.
we had so many good high school sports writers, Jeff Lutz, Tony Adame, so many of just legends, in my opinion. So I want to try to keep that up. Obviously, I can't do it as a one-man show, but I try to get to as much as I can to try to keep that going. Obviously, Bob Lutz too, as the columnist, but so I try to keep up as much as I can with high school sports. Obviously, I would love to do more, but time constraints, only so many hours in the day.
Hey, Taylor, appreciate the time. We'll let you get back to watching some film. I'm sure you got some film to watch, all right?
It's portal season, so I'm a busy guy right now with Wichita State basketball. I appreciate it though.
You bet. That's Taylor Eldridge with the Wichita Eagle. We'll have more of the show right after this.